Hey, good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call the Thursday, May 28th, 2020 meeting of the Clive City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Cirksena.
Here.
Council members Klein.
Here.
Edwards.
Here.
McCoy.
Here.
Judkins.
Here.
And Weaver.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Nice to have everybody present and accounted for here on Zoom. I think this is our fourth Zoom meeting. I believe that's right. But welcome, everybody. And for those of you that may be calling in, you are welcome as well. Good to have you with us. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. We have young Adam Baskin here from our Scout Troop 208. Adam, nice to have you with us. And you are a sophomore at Waukee, is that right?
Yeah, I'm just finishing up my sophomore year now.
Outstanding, outstanding. And you're an you're working on your Eagle Scout project as well.
Yes, sir.
And tell me about that project.
I'm building 30 acoustic panels for the Waukee Middle School band room. They help soak up some of the sound from the rehearsal, makes it a more friendly atmosphere.
Outstanding. Best of luck with that project. And if you'd be so kind to update me and us on your project as you complete it, because we're all here for you. We want to see you be successful. And if you're not careful, we're going to get you on boards and commissions pretty soon. So welcome. Adam, if you would lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Adam, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Best of luck and all the great things you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. With regard to the agenda, we have a couple of changes. Action item number 2 will be pulled from the agenda per some earlier discussion. The second item is consent item Z will need to be amended to resolution setting date of public hearing of 6/25/2020 at 6 p.m. And then the last action item number 1 is a public hearing, and there's no changes there, but we will we'll proceed with that. So I would move approval of the agenda.
Move approval of the amended agenda.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Further discussion?
Your Honor, I'd just like to clarify that if prior discussion has happened regarding action item 2, I have not been a part of that. And I'm fine with that. I just think that the record should reflect that I am not involved in that discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Judkins. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Agenda is approved. Okay, now's the time for citizens presentation. This is where anybody that's joining us on the meeting can address the council on an item that is not currently on the agenda this evening. Is there anybody here to do so?
Mayor, if I can offer some direction for folks, you can do that a couple of ways. The best way is to click at the bottom of your Zoom screen, the participant tab, and there at the bottom of that list, you will see an option to raise your hand. That's the best way to get my attention, and then I can bring you into the conversation. You can also use the chat function. So I'll give everybody a chance to take a look. No hands are going up, sir.
Okay, seeing none, then we'll move to consent items.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Eric. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, will the council please vote? Item passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move to action items. The first item is a public hearing regarding the FY20 budget amendment number 2. And Matthew, did we post appropriate public notice?
Yes, Your Honor, that was published 5/18/2020 in the Des Moines Register.
Thank you, Matthew. And Joyce, I believe you're going to speak to item A, which is the resolution approving the FY20 budget amendment number 2.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. This is our annual process where we revisit our revenue and expense projections that we did back in January when we were doing the adoption of the fiscal year 21 budget. In this process, we go back to those estimates that we had in January and see how close we are 4 months later to hitting those marks. And also, this year, the impacts of the COVID-19 and the challenges it has presented us there. So this was a challenging one to put together. This is our second budget amendment for the year. If you remember, it was back in early July, we did the first amendment, which covered the acquisition of the property for the public safety facility. And then we did an internal borrowing in the process before we got our bond proceeds for the second borrowing we just completed in April. So the funds have been repaid to the water fund for that one, and those transfers are included in this amendment. So as you recall, this form is very broad. It covers all funds and all the programs, and there are multiple departments covered under each of the programs when you look at the expenses. Typically, by state requirements, we're not required to amend the revenues. We usually go through, reassess those. Any big shifts that we have, we will amend for. And this year, we probably did a deeper dive in depth due to the COVID-19 because we wanted to be as transparent as possible. So have a few more amendments there than typical. And I tried to brief those for all of you through the memo in there, so we could be have a better ending balance number for you to impact those. The bigger numbers in there, of course, if you focus on that current amendment column, the other city taxes is our lost funding, which is a big shift because the Polk County election had not even taken place when we adopted this budget. So that's that large number there that we're looking at. And then the other big number is under the other financing sources, which is the borrowing. That we had 2 borrowings this year, one that got completed in the fall then and then one this spring. So anyway, those will be big numbers on the revenue side. And then of course, the negative number is our reduced revenues for charges and services, which were primarily related to our rec programming and aquatic center changes that we were impacted by the COVID-19. So, and on the expense side, I tried to go through and give you highlights on those also. Again, this incorporates all the funds. So as you can see, our ending fund balance on June 30 is significantly larger than our budget was. And that is, I mean, when you look at it, it's easy to point it out. It's our money that we received from all our bond proceeds that we largely still have in our account that will not be expended before the end of June. So. And then we'll be going through and updating you a little later here, and then we'll do it again at the end of June when we get some preliminary numbers to focus on the general fund to see how close we came on those marks for that fund, road use tax, and then trust and agency. So I am happy to go into further detail or address any questions that any of you may have.
Questions, council, for Joyce?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Ted to close the public hearing. Before we do, is there anybody here to speak on this item? Seeing none, will the council please vote?
Hey, Matthew, this is Eric. I'm an aye on that. I'm having some an issue right here, but I'm an aye on this vote.
And I just wanted to mention, I did have my hand raised, but it wasn't noticed. And could I just ask, what is a GEMT grant?
Well, I might let Rick speak to that. That's the governmental emergency. It's
Yeah,
save me. Management.
Governmental emergency medical transport.
There we
What
go.
it is Medicaid has always been or was originally a transport benefit. And so it only has compensated for the cost of essentially driving somebody from point A to point B for a medical need. So somehow in the federal government, they have a program where if you can prove your cost, they will reimburse you the difference between what they've paid you and what your actual costs were. So that essentially moves Medicaid from being the worst paying provider we have to the best paying provider, because now we're going to get compensated for our actual cost of doing business.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. And then I had just wanted to ask if we know we're applying for all the COVID-19 related grants that are available. I know the city had some conversation kind of initiated by our citizen Jane Fogg about funding that potentially could be helpful to those needing assistance with rent payments. And I just wasn't finding much reference to potential revenues from that kind of source. And maybe those would come after July 1 anyway, but I'd be interested in an update on that.
Okay, very good. We can do that.
Yeah, and Susan, I'd be happy to mention that as well in terms of we're going to be very interested to see. I know the governor had made mention of an announcement of some type of rent, eviction, foreclosure fund as a part of the CARES funding that Iowa Finance Authority would be a part of. And I know that this was one thing that we've been researching of what was the state going to do with that funding and how would that trickle down to those non-CDBG direct funded communities. And so I believe she is supposed to make some announcements related to that tomorrow. And whether that will be a grant process through communities or direct to renters and homeowners is we're waiting on those details, and hopefully that'll give us a better picture of what we could be participating in and making sure we're providing that information to those folks in our community that may be impacted by evictions or foreclosures.
Okay, thanks.
Councilwoman, this is Pete. I apologize. I saw your hand go up, but I was not fast enough before we were moving on that. So I'll make sure we slow things down enough so that everybody has a chance to raise hands if they want to.
Just for the record, the passed 5-0 to close the public hearing before discussion.
Move the resolution.
Second. Oh, that's Weaver.
Beat you to it.
Moved by John, seconded by Ted. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote? That item passes 5-0. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you.
Okay, item B under this public hearing item is a COVID-19 financial impact update. Matt?
Thank you, Your Honor. I almost forgot to unmute myself there. Council will be familiar with this memo format that we shared last month. Again, we just wanted to provide an update, and all those updates are in red in terms of what our expected scenarios are related to revenues, Won't go through this in detail, other than just to mention that on the property tax side, we're in good shape to hit that expected, if not higher, scenario. We know that there's still some revenue to come in. One thing to mention, when this memo was written, the governor had yet to extend the waiving of penalties and interest for not paying property taxes. She hadn't yet extended it. She did that on Tuesday, and that extended it to June 25th, I believe. So that is extended for another month. So there may be, some of this may then trickle in, carry over to the next fiscal year in terms of property tax payments. But again, as you can see, we don't have much left to collect there in terms of what was expected. Hotel motel, again, we're waiting for that last quarterly payment, and this will be one that we'll update with you in June. We'll follow the similar memo format and add the June update to it at your second meeting in June. We'll have that collected by then, and again, we anticipate the impacts for this one occurring in the next fiscal year. Utility franchise fee, this was an interesting one. We were kind of curious whether or not it was pandemic related or our lighter winter that we had this past year, and how that impacted revenues. Again, we already kind of planned for this because of the COVID scenario, but again, unsure. It's hard for us to really track and say for sure whether it was the winter, less harsh winter, or the pandemic in terms of gas and electric usage. In terms of overall general fund, and you saw the summary spreadsheets that were included, we're actually anticipating to be in a better cash position than we were projecting back in January. As the council will recall, we were budgeting for use of cash reserves in this fiscal year due to the transfer that we did for the second phase of the flood-prone property buyout program. So that use of cash reserves is actually projected to be less than what we were anticipating, which is a good thing. And a fund balance in exceeds of 30% is what we're estimating at this point. And then also the trust and agency fund is also projected to be in good shape to end this current fiscal year. One thing to note with that, and this is something the council can discuss and provide thoughts on later. I know historically the last couple of years when we had our fund balance in excess of 30%, we've looked at utilizing that for the flood-prone property buyout program. With our current scenario and some unknowns going into the next fiscal year, it would be my recommendation that we hold fast on that fund balance, whatever that may be at the end of this fiscal year, and reserve those funds to deal with any additional funding uncertainty, potential for any second waves of COVID-19 in the fall, and to kind of reserve those full cash reserves as much as we can. So that's something I wanted to mention. Any comments or questions on the general fund or trust and agency fund?
Questions for Matt, council?
I agree with his recommendation.
I do as well. I think that's good advice and good direction as well.
Okay, transferring over to sales tax. Again, we have another update here. I believe I shared with the council last week a state financial report that was put out there that was anticipating the potential of a 4% loss in year over year in terms of sales tax receipts statewide. And that report, I believe, is going to be updated every month. So it'll be a good one for us to track in terms of what the impact may be to the loss. Based on that 4%, at least what they're projecting at this point in this current fiscal year, when that is trued up later this year, we could be between the expected and best scenarios, which is a good thing. Of course, there's a lot more to figure out on this one. This was one we'll be tracking when the state provides additional information here in the coming months. Road use tax, we basically saw what we expected on this. And then as a result of that, in the budget amendment that you just approved, we eliminated the transfer that would have occurred between the road use tax fund and our street rehab capital fund. And then that in combination with the sales tax transfers to the discussion on capital projects. This puts our road use tax fund basically close to the anticipated scenario, and actually slightly better than what we were anticipating, and a nice healthy fund balance for us to deal with any, again, unanticipated ramifications of a second wave or other things that may be coming. As most of you have probably been witnessing, the road traffic seems to have picked back up quite a bit, not necessarily pre-COVID levels, but I've noticed that at certain times of the day, there is a semblance of a rush hour once again. So it'll be interesting as we get updates from the DOT on what they're seeing on roadway traffic and how that affects this fund. Utility funds, again, no noticeable changes here. We are seeing a few bankruptcies. The Granite City one was kind of already in the works before COVID-19, and it sounded like Pier 1 was kind of in the works, but the pandemic could have pushed that one over. So there's a few additional bankruptcies than we're usually dealing with, but I wanted to note that here. And then finally, the last time we had this conversation in April, I know the council had requested kind of an overview of what are the potential impacts of capital projects that we would be recommending at this time. Won't necessarily read through this, but as you can see, still thinking we can do 2 out of the 3 pavement management projects, and then hold that third in reserve just to kind of see where the sales tax revenues go. That's probably the biggest question mark. And there might be the potential that we could still get that third project in later this year, if depending on what we learn more of the next couple of months related to sales tax. So don't necessarily want to write that arterial street concrete patching project off yet, because it also will depend on the kind of bids we get on the asphalt project. We're ready to move that forward. With where oil prices are, there could be a potential we might see some savings in that project, and then it maybe lower the delta for us to be able to move that third project forward. I know all 3 of these projects are important to the council to see that we're moving along our pavement management program. And so that's something that staff will bring back to you as we know more on the revenues that we just discussed. And then finally, some of the sales tax impacts could spill over more likely into the 2021 projects in terms of those that are being supported by sales tax revenue. And I wanted to note on the Polk County side, the next phase of the Clark Street reconstruction was anticipated to be supported by the Polk County local option sales tax revenue. And then on the Dallas County side, the extension of the Greenbelt Trail from where it currently ends just west of Alice's Road to the new bridge currently being constructed across for Westgate Drive. So I know that was a request in the last discussion of what those potential impacts will be. Again, I think we'll have some opportunity as we get to the CIP process later this year and really see that full sales tax picture. We can make some adjustments to these 2021 projects because we do have time on that. So with that, Your Honor, that kind of provides the overview of our current status of COVID-19 financial impacts, and be happy to answer any questions or have any feedback from the council.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate you putting this together. It keeps things in perspective, I think, for all of us. And I think with good direction. Questions for Matt, council? Hearing none, thank you again. We'll move to discussion item 1, and that is the Clive Strategic Plan Action Items Update. Matt.
Thank you, Your Honor. Once a quarter, we provide the council an update on where we're at with the strategic planning items, and especially wanted to do that here in terms of potential impacts from the pandemic of affecting some of these schedules. Don't plan on going through every one of these, but wanted just to highlight a few and some things that will be coming before the council here shortly. And on your top priority list of action items, the last meeting, we moved the residential solid waste contract along, and staff has already had meetings with Metro Waste Authority staff in terms of the process of moving that forward, and you'll see some information that we'll be including in the city newsletter here on that toter transition that we talked about at the last meeting. At your next city council meeting, we're anticipating to be bringing forward the water resources master plan consultant contract with HDR. And Pete and the team have been working very hard on that, and have kind of some exciting things to share in terms of how we really have some rigorous policy discussions on that. And that will also pair nicely with a later item that's on this list of the stream bank assessment that's was recently completed, and some recommendations from that report. Will definitely be some new things for the council to take a look at and consider in terms of approach on stream bank stabilization that we're excited to share with you. And Interfluve, our consultant that worked with us on that. Other one that I want to highlight on this sheet is Mayor Cirksena and Councilmember Judkins and I and Public Works Director Jeff May will be on a call tomorrow morning, actually, with the Country Club Owners Association Board to talk through all of the data and facts related to the latest traffic study that is recommending the installation of a traffic signal at Country Club Boulevard and Hickman Road. I know council has received likely some correspondence from the neighborhood on that, this particular subject. We will also have traffic engineer from Snyder Associates, Mark Harrington, as our subject matter expert on the call as well. And we will be providing a report to the council on that, and then discussing whether or not the city of Clive wants the consent to that installation. I think what's really important there is, as a part of the corridor agreement along Hickman Road, the way that was worded back in 2003, both the DOT and adjacent cities need to consent to installation of these traffic signals. This location was predetermined as a location for a traffic signal at some point in the future. So a lot more to come on that, a lot of detail and a lot of background that we put together. And then we wanted to then obviously have the feedback from the board to present to you as well. Moving along, University Corridor Plan work with West Des Moines continues, and we're, as we've been kind of promoting here the last couple of weeks, is the Social Connect website for getting online input for that process. So we're modified the engagement a little bit there, but we're making do to keep that project moving forward, particularly as a lot of questions are out there now related to commercial real estate and the long-term effects that the pandemic may have on commercial real estate. Here is the stream bank stabilization presentation that you will be seeing at the next meeting. A couple of these, the discussion with the schools, I will admit, have kind of gone on pause a little bit, knowing that they're not actively moving forward with their facility discussions like they were previously. Going to continue to gauge the school district as they are ready, but we know that they're obviously dealing with quite a bit here and trying to figure out what they're going to be doing for their next school year. But it's definitely still on the list and something we'll be reaching out to them about. Again, if as I'm scrolling through here, if there's any questions or comments on any specific items that I haven't made a mention of, please feel free to stop me. The city's facility security assessment and plan. This will be a topic that I'd like to bring back for further discussion in August during the next strategic planning sessions, to really talk about how this pandemic situation may change our approach here and thought process. I think it might pair very nicely with things that we were already talking about enhancing building security, particularly in the City Hall Library building. But this pandemic has definitely brought some more of those items to the forefront, and look forward to talking to the council more about that. As we look at the management agenda actions, again, Greenbelt Landing, we'll be doing some more work on that and bringing that back to you. A lot of these things have been moving forward. We do have demolitions occurring here, hopefully this summer, to put us in a position to actually be able to implement a flood mitigation project at North Walnut Creek. This would be filling the two lots that we've discussed previously on the west side of 75th Street, just across from where the old apartment building was, to provide the city additional protection, potentially up to 100-year level from a North Walnut Creek flashy flood. I think that's all definitely was on our minds earlier this week with some of the rains that we received. Public Safety Facility Project Council is very well aware where we're at on that, and then the coming construction documents that we're now moving to with the site plan approval. One that I wanted to highlight here as well is the Indian Hills Woods improvement. So this is the Indian Hills Woods channel. With our split shifting and public works and parks, you know, we're going to be playing a little bit of catch up this year on maintenance, and need to be getting some permits that we've already submitted permit applications for, and having some discussions with West Des Moines. Whether we're ready to be able to initiate that first phase this fall will depend a little bit on how we're able to play catch up on some of our maintenance items, because originally this was thought of doing as an internal staff project. So in the meantime, we did a little bit of Band-Aid work on the hard corner where we had some more erosion here this spring to buy us a little bit of time, knowing that we've got a much bigger project to come here. So more to come on this, but just wanted to note that we're kind of looking at what might happen to this schedule here in the near future. Westcom strategic plan, something that the chiefs and I have been very active in, that did get delayed originally because of some of the cyber issues over in West Des Moines, and then the pandemic kind of set us back a little bit. But we actually, in fact, just had a meeting this morning, a virtual meeting this morning on this. Pretty excited about some of the tasks, or at least the objectives that we've laid out for that strategic plan. One of them being turning Westcom into a completely independent organization at some point within the next 5 years, which again, we'll have presentations back to all of the city councils that are members of Westcom once this process has been completed. And we've been having really good engagement from both the chiefs, Westcom staff, and also the city managers from the 5 communities, which has been really great. Here, just wanted to mention that I know Pete will be bringing back to you, likely in June, a report from the Citizen Satisfaction Survey to present that information. And then lastly here, just a few quick items. Regional water governance discussion has kind of been put on pause in the middle of the pandemic. I would imagine that those discussions will need to fire back up soon in some format, just because there was some timeline that some communities need to have those discussions moving along. I will say that I briefly participated or listened in on the Board of Trustees meeting earlier this week, and they're down to now 2 finalists. Ted Corrigan, who's the current interim general manager, and then another gentleman out of California who previously worked in Iowa, as the 2 finalist candidates for the general manager position. So they are moving forward with filling that vacancy following the passing of Bill Stowe. Then the last one I'll mention is the 5 Waukee boundary update. I know Doug has been working on this, and we'll be providing an update here, likely either the next meeting, one of the meetings in June, on both some annexation, de-annexation boundary updates, and then some acquisitions that we're working on related to the future Alice's Road urbanization, street urbanization project that we know we're going to have properties for right-of-way purposes to acquire. So more information to come very soon on that, and then additional discussions related to the zoning ordinance. The board, Planning and Zoning Commission, has been working through that, and we'll have another round to bring back to the council here soon. So with that, Your Honor, I just wanted to cover kind of some of the highlights here. Happy to entertain any questions or comments from the council on where we're at with these action items.
And thank you. It's a big list, and we're going to be going through all of this again here very, very shortly in August, and that might as well be next week as fast as things are going. So appreciate this update. Council, are there questions on anything specific that Matt had to talk about?
Not seeing any hands, Mayor.
All right, then we'll move. Thank you, Matt. We'll move on to a report.
One quick thing, Your Honor. I know you and I talked about this, is just reconfirming those dates in August. With everything going on, just wanted to take a minute with the mayor and council. The current schedule that we have for the next strategic planning workshops, we're in late August, with the first session with the management team and the council together on Thursday, August 20th. So that would have been an evening session. And then Saturday morning, August 22nd would be just council only. And then the final session, Friday afternoon, August 28th. So our current approach right now, we're intending to have Lyle present for that, pending any changes with the pandemic, and looking at utilizing one of our facilities, likely the special events building across the street or the community room, to be able to provide a very spaced out setup for all of us, recognizing that we would likely still need to be implementing social distancing by that point in August, to have everybody together though in person. And so that is our current working thoughts on approach, and then have individually packaged lunches or dinners for food during those workshops. But just wanted to touch base with the council that those dates were still good. And then any concerns or thoughts on our approach with those workshops in August. Sorry, I forgot about that, Your Honor.
No, that's fine. It looks good on my schedule. Council?
Looks good.
Yep, I'm good. Can we modify that a bit though and have McCoy call in instead?
I'll video in. You need to see me.
Always
Looks
nice.
good to me too.
Susan, okay with your schedule?
Yes, it is. I did wonder how many of our rooms are conducive to hosting people calling in, or not just calling in, but visible on screen.
So as of, and Pete and Matthew can speak to this a little bit, as of right now, the council chambers is our, we call it our Zoom room, where we have the ability to do what we're doing here at the council meeting. And this is actually something that we're going to be testing once the council is ready to come back to start some in-person meetings and kind of have a hybrid of in-person and virtual. So the council chambers is set up for that, to be able to do that with the video and the audio. We do have the ability to have cameras in other conference rooms with phone audio as well, in a couple of our conference rooms here in City Hall. But those are the only rooms that, at least I'm aware of, that we have the ability to do that at least today.
Well, I just wanted to mention that I'm expecting that not just for council, but for other types of meetings that the city may need to hold, it's going to become the way you do it. And so it's really worth planning for how to implement that in some of the other locations, unless you just intend to have everyone participate from their offices on separate laptops.
Councilwoman, that's a great point, and I can tell you that Dennis Harkin has been having and helping contribute to the discussions with the new public safety facility on how those rooms will be optimized to accommodate this kind of technology. The big limitation we have is not the video and the audio when we're in places like the special events building. It will be something like a Zoom room that allows us to share materials with other people who are participating. But even that can be overcome in some ways, assuming that folks are joining using a device that allows them to see items that are shared, and we can put a device in front of each person at those meetings that we may be doing in person with some social distancing. But we'll keep working on solutions for that and make sure that we listen carefully to the council's direction on what kind of capabilities they want us to strive to have when we do strategic planning and any other public meetings moving forward.
I think it'll end up being a real significant savings on travel for city officials, so that can help to offset some of the expense for what we have to implement.
Okay, good, very good, good discussion. Anything else on strategic plan items for Matt? We got the schedule, and that's 98% of the challenge right there is getting 5 council members and the mayor to agree on a schedule in the future. So we're well ahead. Anything else? I heard that, Councilmember McCoy.
That was Weaver.
Okay, very good. Then we'll move to reports, and Pete, we'll start at your end.
Thank you, Your Honor. number of items have been touched on, but I want to say them again so that you all know that we're also doing good communications, or will be doing additional communications around these items. The Clark Street project is full steam ahead right now, and our intention tomorrow to go out and get some video there or do some Facebook Live and give people updates on the project. We did receive some compliments from folks on how we have set up the directional information about the road closure at 104th and Clark. And we continue to watch for feedback from the neighborhood and people who are using that space to make sure we are getting them information so they don't end up at that intersection and have to turn around to the extent that we can. Trash carts is going to be the primary big story for the month of June. We don't want to surprise anybody when we get up to that date, when a new Metro waste can shows up and when their old existing trash cart disappears. And I'm happy to say that the folks at Metro Waste, Leslie and her team, they've done a really great job helping us prepare so that we can get content that's ready for the newsletter that'll be arriving in mailboxes in just a few days. That is a front page story, sharing space with the mayor's letter for the month. And we'll be looking at other ways, including some possible, well, a number of other ways that we'll be able to partner with Metro to share that information. The changes in the proclamation that happened yesterday, we'll be making sure all those are updated on our COVID page, and we are contemplating whether this is going to be worth an actual media release focused on the changes around Parks and Rec. Last time when we highlighted changes in the proclamation, we led with that. That seemed to be the big part of the story that folks were interested in, and that's going to be a big part of this story as well. So we may be sending that out, and if we do, I'll make sure that I give the council heads up before it goes to media. We may also get some inquiries about some of the information that was shared about the city's financial position for the end of this fiscal and where we anticipate going for the coming fiscal year as well. Matt's memo in the packet will be our basis for sharing any information if we receive requests from media on that. I can tell you that we've been very responsive to all of our media partners who have asked about this. Thus far, the Register, much earlier on in the pandemic, and the Business Record more recently asked us about what this meant from a revenue standpoint and from a staffing standpoint and expenses. And Joyce and her team and Matt have done a wonderful job putting it together in good, concise language that is easy for folks to digest and understand. Finally, our best community engagement around community morale and reminding people that we can all stick with it and we can all keep each other safe has by far been our GOATs, the most popular city employees. I don't think it's even close. Roxanne, I think, didn't even have us do a review for them. They were that good this year. It was obvious they were going to get the highest mark. So the GOATs with their shirts and the masks now have been very popular, and we look forward to selling a number of those, obviously recouping the cost for the city, but then making a generous contribution to Clive Community Services because we know they're going to be needing those resources for many, many months to come.
Pete, outstanding, and great for the goats. Glad to hear they're doing well. Questions for Pete, council?
Just a comment, I'm glad to hear the masks are here because last I heard they weren't. So that's good.
Primary source, Clive Chamber member, they did a wonderful job helping us not only get through some of the supply chain challenges, but also come up with a design that when you wear it doesn't obscure the logo. So folks know that you're rocking your Greenbelt Goat style when you're wearing it.
Did you have? Okay, seeing nothing further for Pete, thank you, Pete. We're going to move on to Ted.
All right, just a couple quick updates on MPO. The policy committee last week voted unanimously to cut the membership dues for each city member 50% for the upcoming year. It was felt with the pandemic and all the financial issues across the metro that was the prudent thing for the MPO to do. We found out that we had 82% reserves, which seems a little high. That took a lot of us by surprise. So the exec committee has actually asked the finance committee to take that back and look at what the appropriate level should be to set that policy, because that seems a little high. But it means that the MPO is financially well enough off to be able to offer that 50% reduction for the upcoming year. So that's good news. And then the last thing is that the Iowa DOT has moved up a project to expand I-80 west of basically Jordan Creek to 6 lanes both ways. That was not slated until like 2032 or 2031, something like that. So they moved it up to, I believe, 2021. And they're going to be starting that project pretty soon here. Because apparently, with not just the traffic patterns, but there's some bridges out in that direction that need to be repaired. And so they felt like it was prudent to begin that significantly earlier than what they had originally planned. So that's all I have.
And does that have any impact on our potential slotting for Hickman 35 project?
Not that I'm aware of. I'll verify that, but I think they're independent.
Okay, very good. Other questions for Ted, Council? Okay, thanks, Ted. Eric, we'll go to you.
Nothing to report tonight, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, sir. John.
2 quick things. One, I wanted to compliment Matt on how quickly he was able to deal with Walnut Creek Little League situation. I'm sure he'll touch on that in his report, but it was very helpful when we were about to be inundated with requests concerning Walnut Creek Little League that he was able to get a reply out quickly and correct the misinformation that was there. So that's much appreciated. Second thing that I wanted to note is the great work of our police chief in responding to a very lengthy inquiry following the Minneapolis incident. There was a long list of questions, and Mike was able to get that turned around quickly, emphasizing Clive's policy and how good a policy we have. Let me just quote what that reply said. Wow, this is really thorough, and I appreciate you taking the time to reply. It's really comforting to know that we have good policies in place and that they are continually reviewed and updated. Again, I really appreciate the time you've taken answering these questions. So again, just showing how appreciative folks are of being able to get information and further confirmation of what a good job Mike and his folks do as far as having policies in place to be prepared for what may come. So kudos on that. That's all I've got.
Well, I'll definitely second that. And Mike, thank you. I'll add, because you didn't just reply, you replied with in-depth specifics that made sense and that I think anybody could read and take away from it and be confident in their understanding. So thank you for that. John, I'm going to ask you to continue to speak here for just a moment as our personnel committee met this morning, and maybe just remind the council of our timing on city manager review, et cetera, and anything else you'd like to add as chairman of that group.
Certainly, you'll be seeing a recommendation in an upcoming packet in June, which will summarize the feedback that we got from you all collectively and individually, as well as from the department heads. Suffice it to say, everyone has great praise for the work that Matt has done, and you'll see more information on that going forward again for the council packet in June as far as looking at his performance. But again, very, very positive. Thank you all for getting that information to us. It's very, very helpful in the process.
Thank you, John. And again, just for the council's edification, appreciate your leadership in this area. It's a lot of work, and there's a real skill set that's needed there, and you've definitely displayed that over the years. So thanks for your leadership and for doing that for all of us. The process continues to get better, better than it's ever been this year, in my opinion. So Thanks to you and Ted for your work as well on the committee. With that, I'll pass to Susan.
Well, I'll just mention that the Finance Committee for Bravo met last week and continues to address real concerns about the opportunity for funding some of the cultural entities for next year. And I'm really proud of the work that Sally Dix and her staff have done in connecting with everyone to help them try to plan for what is likely to not be great news, but looking for ways to provide support beyond just financial support. So there was even discussion about the potential to not be able to have the annual gala. So they're very aware of some of the implications we could be dealing with. And I would just mention that as the city staff looks at coming back to work together, I know that my office has a lot of concerns, and I'm sure many of the rest of you do with your offices too. And I'm hopeful that with the governor releasing a report from the University of Iowa yesterday, underscoring that if people were to wear face shields, it doesn't necessarily refer as much to masks, which have kind of started to have a political undertone, unfortunately, but these face shields are being heavily recommended. And so I hope it's something we can consider in terms of, you know, what, because we know that there's nothing magic about 6 feet, that is not sufficient in terms of distancing. So being as prepared as possible and possibly recommending some coverings like that, I hope you'll take that seriously.
Questions for Susan, Council? Okay, thank you, Susan. Michael?
I have nothing, Your Honor.
Thank you, Council Member. Madam Council, anything for the group?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay, Matt.
Just some final items, Your Honor, kind of related to our COVID situation, where we're at today. Councilmember Edwards referred to the response that we got out here today. And we know that there'll be more of these kinds of situations that come up as folks are interpreting changes to the governor's proclamation and how the mayor's proclamation either applies or doesn't apply to those situations. And so we know that these things will come up, and I think that's, you know, he kind of spoke to that in terms of how we communicate this latest proclamation, and we'll be sending that out where we're having playgrounds open on June 1st on Monday, and that will include the new Wildwood Park playground that was, you know, we had that kind of stalled out over the winter. We weren't able to pour the port in place surfacing. That has now been done. Just a few little sidewalk fixes to be done, but that will be provided. Also, staff, we're all having a lot of discussions to Councilmember Judkins' point in terms of what it looks like as we start bringing folks back together. This was the first week of Parks and Public Works being back together, although with staggered shifting or staggered shifts. So not everybody all together, having staggered lunches and breaks and start times, and that seemed to go pretty well this week for our first week of having everybody back together at the same time. And we're gradually starting to have folks come back into the offices and starting to talk about, as we get into later June, what it looks like to be reopening offices, depending on what the pandemic track is on. And then the conversation and related to face coverings and the thought process of requiring folks that are coming into city facilities, mainly public lobbies and the library, to have face coverings. The staff is in the process of making sure if that is, you know, this is something I would love to have the council's feedback on. It's something that I would recommend that we do, and then have any staff that are interacting have face coverings on. The library has already been doing that with their curbside collection. We would have something similar for all the front desk areas as folks are interacting with the public, even though we have put up some physical barriers as well. But as we've been talking about at the staff level, it's how do we set the model and leadership on that among staff. You know, our folks in the field, Public Works and Parks, have been doing that all this week and past weeks in terms of the face masks, the cloth ones that have been provided. So we're at a good start, but that's going to really be a next step for us. And so be happy to kind of get the council's feedback on that as we look at this return to work plan that we're working on. Really, it's more about reopening, I guess, in terms of we've been maintaining operations at a high level throughout this process. We're now getting to the point. Obviously, the seasonal staffing side will be quite a bit down this year related to the aquatic center not reopening for open swimming. Staff is still looking at potential of swimming lessons, and we'll be bringing that potential model back to you for your feedback and direction later this summer. But for the most part, we'll have, you know, the potential to have some seasonal programs here this summer. And then now that the library has moved to a very successful, I might add, curbside collection that's gone very well. So we're starting to progress and bringing part-time folks back. So that's been a good progression and maintain services. So as we really talk about the public and coming into the facility, we would really love your feedback on that.
Matt, Councilman Weaver has a question.
Hey, Matt, to that question. Go ahead, Ted.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I thought you were going to ask something. So with respect to the mask, I'm fine with that, Matt. I think it probably makes sense for us to require that. I guess my question is, would we have like a supply of masks if someone does happen to come into the facility without one, or are we going to force them to leave? How would we handle that?
So we definitely would have a supply. So one thing that we've been looking at, in fact, even today, is getting a supply of disposable masks. And actually, we were able to find ones that are individually packaged that we could provide and have at each of the public access lobby library areas for folks to use. And so if they wanted to come into the library, for example, but didn't have a mask, we would have a disposable mask to provide to them. I'm sure you've seen some of the news reports about certain businesses where folks have been, I guess, frustrated or gotten violent or angry about having to come in to wear a mask. I think one thing we've shown over the last couple of months is we do have the ability to provide these services online and over the phone. And so that's a procedure thing that we're talking through at a staff level. It's a risk that we take of that kind of confrontation. But knowing that even if we're denying somebody service, in-person service, because they're not willing to wear a mask in the facility, we do have, you know, for the library, curbside collection, online services that we can provide. So that some of the things that we're talking about at a staff level, how do we make this most convenient to the public and do our best to protect all at the same time.
Okay. And can you give an update on the softball leagues? What are our plans with that again?
Sure. Actually, Richard, I don't know if you wanted to kind of outline what you and the staff have been discussing related to a June 15th start date and how that relates to some other suburban communities. Oh, there he goes.
Yeah, I'd be happy to give an update. So what we're looking at from a standpoint of recreational leagues out at Campbell Park, we're looking at probably a June 15th start for softball with a lot of different protocols in place. Those will probably include no spectators in the stands, no use of the dugouts. Teams would have to line up along the first and third base lines with social distancing. If people wanted to view or watch the games, we'd ask them to be outside the outfield fence there so they could watch that in a safe manner. Just looking at a lot of different ways that we can allow the activity to happen, but maintain as much social distancing as possible and reducing the contact with people while they're actually playing. So looking at ways to have like a second spot where people slide instead of being tagged out at home base, things like that. Then in regards to our stand volleyball programs, we're not quite sure if we'll be able to safely do that yet. We're doing a lot of research to see, are there ways that we could allow that to happen, but keep the ball clean and keep people distant as possible. No recommendation on that specifically at this time, but hoping to get that figured out by doing a lot of research with adjacent communities and like CDC guidance and some other research out there. So hopeful that we can try to get some of these activities going, but we just want to make sure that we can offer them in a safe way.
So Richard, do you have those protocols for the softball league specifically in written form that you could possibly share with me?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're still in the point where we're drafting them. So we're probably about 90%. So Jeff Lucas on our team has been doing a great job of kind of working with some of the guidance out there through the state of Iowa and the CDC, as well as we're having conversations with other adjacent communities that have these facilities as well. But yeah, we'd be happy to send you our draft form at this point with the hope that we get them finalized here probably next week sometime.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. If you could just email that over to me, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to.
Matt, it sounds good to me to move toward masks and provide as much safety as we can. I think the key will be communication.
I would agree. Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, I agree, John. And Matt, are you thinking once we start this, we'll do it ongoing and as needed until something changes? And but basically it'll be an ongoing thing that we do until circumstances change and warrant different direction.
Correct, until we have any further additional guidance than what we have to date to go off of.
You know, the only thing I would add, Matt, is that we make sure that we communicate that out via, our website and our newsletter to the public. One of the things I think if people don't like surprises, if they understand that, the protection required, then we'll get a much better feedback from the public, for the citizens on this.
100% agree, and I think what we've found is the newsletters, electronic newsletters that we have for Park and Rec and the library have been very, very useful tools. I think when we announced the curbside collection for the library, it about broke the phone lines in terms of the quickness of the response on that. So those and other tools will be ones that will definitely make sure we're communicating that out. And I would imagine that a goat mascot may be involved with that communication.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Okay. Thank you very much. Council, any other questions for Matt on any item? I think Matt can attest it's been a busy week this week, without question, across the spectrum. Okay, seeing none. Matthew, any other correspondence?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Council, anything for the good of the order? Hearing none, I'm going to adjourn us at 7:03. Thanks, everyone.
All right, have a good night.
Have a great rest of the week and weekend.
Good night.
Good night.